This continues the series of videos I'm making on the Odes of John Keats, based on the book of the same name by Helen Vendler. I'm trying to make each so that they can stand alone, but I would recommend watching the others to get a fuller picture. All of the views I describe in these videos are Vendler's, except where I note otherwise. This video is about the Ode on a Grecian Urn, which Vendler considers to be the fourth in the series of 6 odes that Keats wrote in the year 1819. These poems form a progressively deepening meditation on art and existence, taking up different senses and art forms as models along the way. The previous Ode to a Nightingale took up the sense of hearing and the artistic model of the natural music of birdsong. The Ode on a Grecian Urn instead takes up the sense of sight and the artistic model of visual art, specifically the bas-relief sculpture carved around an ancient Greek marble urn. This is similar to what you can see here in the image of the magnificent Portland vase, which Keats is likely himself to have seen, though that is in glass and from the Roman period. I'll read the poem before describing Vendler's analysis of it. For this one, each stanza has its own slide. Here it is. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, thou foster child of silence and slow time, sylvan historian, who canst thus express a flowery tale more sweetly than our rhyme. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape of deities or mortals, or of both, in Tempe or the dales of Arcady? What men or gods are these? What maidens loathe? What mad pursuit? What struggle to escape? What pipes and timbrels? What wild ecstasy? Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore ye soft pipes play on, not to the sensual ear, but, more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Fair youth beneath the trees, thou canst not leave thy song, nor ever can those trees be bare. Bold lover, never, never canst thou kiss, though winning near the goal, yet do not grieve. She cannot fade, though thou hast not thy bliss. For ever wilt thou love, and she be fair. Ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves, nor ever bid the spring adieu, and happy melodist, unwearied, for ever piping songs for ever new. More happy love, more happy, happy love, for ever warm and still to be enjoyed, for ever panting and for ever young, all breathing human passion far above, that leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead and a parching tongue. Who are these coming to the sacrifice? To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer lowing at the skies, and all her silken flanks with garlands dressed? What little town by river or sea-shore, or mountain built with peaceful citadel, is emptied of this folk this pious morn? And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can e'er return. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought, with forest branches and the trodden weed, thou silent form dost tease us out of thought as doth eternity, cold pastoral. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man, to whom thou sayest, beauty is truth, truth beauty, that is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know. As Vendler explains, all the odes following the first investigate creativity by taking up various attitudes towards the senses, almost as though the odes were invented as a series of controlled experiments in the suppression or permission of sense experience. In the second ode to Psyche, Keats shuts out all the external senses as art is to be something wholly internal. In the third ode to a nightingale, he shuts out all the senses but hearing, as he hopes to become wholly absorbed in the song of the bird and so forget about the sorrows of the world. And now, in the Ode on a Grecian Urn, he suppresses all the senses but sight in order to enter into the timeless world of the artifact. The Odes to a Nightingale and On a Grecian Urn are closely related, both in their rhyme scheme and in their theme. Both were first published together in the art journal Annals of the Fine Arts. Both are directly concerned with an external artifact or artwork. In Nightingale, this is the bird's music, and here, of course, it is the urn. In the Ode to a Nightingale, art was conceived as something natural and spontaneous, like the song of the bird, reflecting Keats' earlier view that, if poetry come not as naturally as the leaves to a tree, it had better not come at all. It was conceived as a stream of pure sensation which bore no relation to the world, but which the listener could become absorbed in order to forget all the woes of the world. It was, in effect, all beauty without truth. Keats is dissatisfied with this view of art, and so writes the Ode on a Grecian Urn to capture a more complex and mature vision, wherein the artifact is carefully planned and chiseled, and where what it expresses are the recognizable forms of the real world. Art conceived on this model is, in other words, a constructive and conscious shaping of a medium, and that what is created is representational, bearing some relation to truth. The internal art of the Ode to Psyche was also representational. It mirrored external forms and so hoped to preserve them from loss. However, this was found to be futile and was replaced in the Ode to a Nightingale by the view of art as escape from the world through aesthetic trance. The Ode on a Grecian Urn represents an advance over both of these views. Here, the representational function of art, rather than recreating outer things inside us in order to save them, allows us to go out of ourselves and enter into other modes of being. And rather than being an escape that blocks out the world, art here becomes a refuge, existing within the world and referring to it, transforming the world's sorrows in its own light. The Ode to a Nightingale reserved questioning until the very end, when the philosophic mind emerged from the attempted trance. In the Ode on a Grecian Urn, where concern for truth is at the center, questioning or interrogation is abundant and becomes its constitutive trope. Vendler calls it the trope of the perplexed mind. And here we have a mind that is aware, active, and wrestling with the relations between beauty and truth. The shape of the ode is similar to that of Nightingale, that is to say, a U-shaped curve going deep into a subject or scene and then returning out of it, as she puts it, a movement from inception to intensity to desolation, driven by a wish for completion. However, here the pattern is repeated 3 times. There are 3 different entrances into the urn. Each time the poet becomes immersed in a particular scene on the urn. Each time he explores a different hypothesis about art. And each time an interjection of the thinking mind brings him out of it while drawing his attention from the content of the scene to its medium. This is rounded off by a final stanza in which the urn is seen almost entirely as medium, in which it utters its famous lines concerning beauty and truth. The first hypothesis about art is that it simply illustrates something external to it. In this case, some ancient legend we have not yet identified. It therefore elicits questioning of a factual nature. What men or gods are these? The second hypothesis is that art is a kind of mirror. It shows us ourselves, though in an eternal or archetypal light. Seeing art in this way elicits a somewhat self-centered sympathy with this idealized human state. The lover, for instance, who will always remain in the giddy first throes of love, the beloved maiden who will always be beautiful. Forever wilt thou love, and she be fair. The third hypothesis is a little hard to summarize in a single phrase. Art as illustration and art as mirror are taken from Vendler. So I am coining the phrase art as world for the third. This is the view that art gives us a world of its own, other beings and modes of being to empathetically engage with. What's more, it's a world that we mutually create, the artwork and the observer. We can see this in the questions the poet asks in the fourth stanza. No town is portrayed on the urn, for instance, and yet he wonders about it and imagines it, and in doing so, all but makes it a part of the artwork. I'll talk in more depth about each of these shortly. Finally, the poet having emerged from these three different scenes, he reflects on the artistic medium of the urn itself. It is the art object itself that he focuses on. O Attic shape, fair attitude, with breed of marble men and maidens overwrought. The overarching theme of this ode is the relationship between beauty and truth, culminating in the famous last lines that seem to declare their identity. This also means the relationship between art and reality, between the aesthetic absorption in the three scenes and the detached appreciation of aesthetic medium in the final stanza. I've mentioned the trope of interrogation that is present through most of the ode, and how this is a result of Keats' concern with truth in this poem. Another result of this concern is his preference for language that is more simple and propositional than he typically uses, especially in the middle of the ode where Vendler says he writes, "in the plainest outline." Consider the propositional and relatively unadorned nature of lines like these. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore, ye soft pipes play on. The melodies are simply sweet, the pipes simply soft, and the whole thing has the air of a logical syllogism. This culminates, of course, in the final grand equation, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. I'll now go through the poem section by section to show the things I've just talked about in more detail. The first stanza begins, as Vendler puts it, grateful but equilibrated and archaeological, as the poet praises the urn. But this soon gives way to a flurry of factual questions about the first scene he beholds on it. What leaf-fringed legend haunts about thy shape? What men or gods are these? What maidens loathe? What mad pursuit? What pipes and timbrels? The main purpose of these questions appears to be identifying the myth that the scene depicts, the characters in it, perhaps even the particular musical instruments used. This suggests a naive, mimetic view of art, art as simply copying or depicting something else, art as illustration. As Vendler says, this is the view that art tells us a story, a history about some people who are not ourselves. There's a hint of voyeurism in this view, and this is intensified as question piles on question, and the scene seems to become not just an erotic pursuit, perhaps of some god for a nymph or mortal maiden, but with the addition of instruments and ecstasy, a full-fledged Dionysian orgy. But suddenly, at the point where the poet seems all but swept away, his reflective mind interjects with the first lines of stanza II. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. Therefore ye soft pipes play on. Not to the sensual ear, but more endeared, pipe to the spirit ditties of no tone. Here we are reminded of the medium, of the urn itself. There is in fact no audible music, and likewise no sensuality. The ecstasy of voyeuristic immersion in the scene is rejected, and detached aesthetic appreciation is elevated above it. Thus, the first immersion in a scene and in an aesthetic hypothesis is ended, and the next one begins. In these next two stanzas, overt questioning is suspended. The scene is a lover wooing a fair maiden to the accompaniment of music. It is an archetypal scene, as says Vendler, showing the unity of love, beauty, and art. In this new hypothesis, the artwork is a mirror. Rather than showing us others, it shows us ourselves, our own feelings and actions, only in a finer tone. This phrase is from a letter by Keats to his friend Benjamin Bailey, in which he describes a favourite speculation of his, namely, that we shall enjoy ourselves hereafter by having what we called happiness on earth repeated in a finer tone. The timeless scene on the Greek urn shows us a love that never wavers, a beauty that never fades, and an artistic creativity that is ever new. It reminds us by contrast of the lines in the previous Ode to Psyche about how in the real world beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. It shows us, in other words, flattering archetypes rather than flawed and messy realities, and allows us to sympathetically identify with them. This sympathy is therefore perhaps more narcissistic wish than genuine empathy with other beings. This section begins with the restrained propositional language I referred to earlier. Heard melodies are sweet, but those unheard are sweeter. The youth beneath the trees is simply fair. As a lover, he is simply bold. The trees themselves are simply stated rather than described. Compare this with the luxuriant descriptions of trees and flowers in the bower scenes of Psyche and of Nightingale. However, in the third stanza, the temperature rises. Ah, happy, happy boughs that cannot shed your leaves. More happy love, more happy, happy love, forever warm and still to be enjoyed. It's like the passion that was so well restrained in the previous stanza now comes bursting forth in excess. The poet once again becomes absorbed in the scene, this time identifying with the eternal artist and eternal passionate lover. But then the reflective mind suddenly intervenes again, reminding him of real human passion, which is not ever perfect, but which rather leaves a heart high sorrowful and cloyed, a burning forehead, and a parching tongue. This brings the poet out of his immersion in the scene and back to an awareness of the medium. The impression of timeless perfection is due to this being a picture carved upon an urn. In the sixth stanza, the poet again enters a scene on the urn, this time of an ancient sacrificial procession, a group of townsfolk leading a cow to be sacrificed at some shrine. This entrance and immersion explores the hypothesis of art as world, that the urn is, in Vendler's words, a self-contained anonymous world complete in itself, which asks from us an empathic identification, supremely free both of factual inquiry and of self-interest. The subject matter assists this. A ritual sacrificial procession is ancient, foreign, and remote from anything Keats has known. Unlike the previous scene, so familiar and dear to Keats, and therefore so easy to wishfully identify with, this scene is strange, and therefore so much more open to a genuine exploratory empathy. Here questioning returns, but with a different tone and deeper intent than the factual curiosity of the first stanza. Asking, what men or gods are these, in that stanza, is different from asking, who are these coming to the sacrifice, To what green altar, O mysterious priest, leadst thou that heifer lowing at the skies? By asking these questions, the poet is engaging with and imaginatively entering into the world indicated by the scene. What's more, he is co-creating that world with the urn's artist, as the urn actually shows neither the town from which the procession came, nor the altar to which it is going. Here, says Vendler, the speaker is really for the first time the truly aesthetic spectator, viewing the scene with a speculative curiosity which is no longer idle nor hectic. He no longer makes a self-absorbed, contrastive referral to his own human case, but rather extends himself in a generous loss of self in the other. And yet, without compromising the otherness of the scene, it does have profound resonance with all human experience. Life is, like this scene, a sacrificial procession, whose ultimate end and origin are unknown. Death awaits us all, and we are ever walking toward it, though for the moment walking together. Perhaps like the people, celebrating with pious awe, perhaps like the heifer, crying out with dread. And this cry, this lowing of the heifer, Vendler points out how music was represented in the first two scenes, the pipes and timbrels of the orgy, the happy melodist beneath the never-bare trees. But here, no music is mentioned. The procession seems to move in silence. Only the eerie lowing of the sacrificial cow breaks that silence. Vendler comments on this. The effect produced is a falling silent of accompaniment, and of the incapacity of music to express either the final animal utterance of the victim or the final silence of that little town. Even unheard melodies do not encompass that pathos. The poet's absorption in the scene culminates in imagining the three different possible locations of the little town, but then the reflective mind interjects yet again as the poet addresses it. And little town, thy streets forevermore will silent be, and not a soul to tell why thou art desolate can e'er return. This turns the poet's awareness back to the medium, to the urn as artifact. The town will always be empty because the frozen scene carved onto the urn can never allow for the townsfolk's return. But, on another level, these lines confront us with the forlornness and barrenness of death, which Vendler speculates Keats displaces from the end of the procession, from the green altar, to its beginning. The abandoned town is like the life we shall have vacated when we die. Process is a key theme of the poem. The subject for the ode is supposedly a static one, a carved marble urn where everything is present and complete, as opposed to the temporal nature of a song that begins, continually changes, and then ends. And yet, the scenes on the urn are surprisingly dynamic. The erotic pursuit of the first scene, the sacrificial procession of the last, and while the middle scene of the lover wooing his beloved seems to be especially static, the very way that Keats alternates between immersion in content and awareness of medium reveals a deeper kind of process. That process by which the mind, in appreciating a work of art, necessarily alternates between engagement and disengagement. Life's sadness, Keats realizes, does not lie simply in the facts of old age, sickness, and death. Neither does it lie in the fact that the dull brain perplexes and retards the sensual reverie that would allow us to forget these. Rather, it lies in the very existence of origins, processions, and ends, in the fact of process, says Vendler. And process is unavoidable. I referred just now to the rhythm of engagement and disengagement that the mind imposes on art in the process of appreciating it. This is illustrated in the very structure of the poem, with its repeated immersions and detachments, and is, at least in Vendler's reading, a key to its mysterious ending. We cannot be immersed in the content and attend to the medium at the same time. and yet both are necessary for an appreciation of art and unavoidably oscillate in spite of our intentions. In the final stanza, the poet retreats almost entirely from content to focus on medium. We can see this in the more detached and technical language he uses of the urn. O Attic shape, cold pastoral. And this is not language of rapt attention, but of active intellectual mastery, as he classifies the urn. And yet, even here, the content seems to exert a magnetic pull. After referring to the marble men and maidens overwrought, he adds, with forest branches and the trodden weed, as though the weeds really were and could be trod upon. The urn, though in some sense static and complete, implies process, along with its disagreeable consequences like age, death, and woe. We see this especially in the scene of the sacrificial procession, where these disagreeables are implied and felt, if not quite explicitly stated. The artwork of the urn is capacious. Like truth itself, it embraces all that is. But the poetry of Keats is even more capacious. In the final few lines, he places the urn in the context of passing generations. Though in one sense the urn is eternal in relation to them, yet the experience of seeing and enjoying and co-creating the art of the urn is one experience in a whole human life, one recurrent experience in the procession of generations. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain in midst of other woe than ours, a friend to man. In framing his last lines in this way, Keats implicitly embraces and accepts age, death, and woe, just as the urn does. He also accepts the urn itself, art and its beneficent power, which exists in the midst of all this, and yet, strangely, can show it all in a new light. Keats touches on this transformation in a letter he wrote to his brothers 2 years before he wrote the Ode. The excellence of every art is its intensity, capable of making all disagreeables evaporate from their being in close relationship with beauty and truth. Examine King Lear, and you will find this exemplified throughout. By showing us real human experience in this light, again and again, generation after generation, art is a true friend to man, providing a continual refuge, though not an escape, from the woes of the world. We come now to the most famous and perhaps mysterious lines of the poem. This is the urn's message to humanity. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know. Because the quotation marks enclose only the first part of this, beauty is truth, truth beauty, there has been some debate about whether it is the urn or the poet speaking in the second part, and if the poet, whether this is his response to the urn. The language, however, suggests this isn't directed to one individual. Ye is plural, not singular. Vendler believes that the whole thing is spoken by the urn. The quotation marks are placed around the enigmatic epigram for emphasis. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. One way to read this is as a forceful statement of a kind of romantic mysticism whereby what is most beautiful is necessarily true. Another way to read it is as a relativistic statement, as there is no objective truth, all we have is beauty, that this is truth enough. But I think both these interpretations are too simplistic, especially when considering the way the poem has explored the inevitability of process, has begun to integrate the disagreeables, and has concerned itself with truthfulness even when this has disrupted aesthetic reverie. And after all, the urn doesn't just say beauty is truth or truth is beauty, but both of these together. I think Keats is being deliberately cryptic here because he wants us to wrestle with this, perhaps because he himself was wrestling with it. I'm really not sure I understand the full meaning of the urn's epigram. I'm not even sure I fully captured Vendler's interpretation of it, as she doesn't explain it in quite as much depth as I'd like. Nevertheless, here is my best attempt. As Keats found in his experience of art an unavoidable oscillation between attention to content and attention to medium, here he hints at a more general oscillation in human experience between beauty and truth. Vendler says the urn is like an oracle, and like an oracle says two things that are equally true. Here is how she explains this. It says, beauty is truth when we are looking at it with the eyes of sensation, seeing its beautiful forms as actual people, alive and active. It says, truth is beauty when we are looking at it with the eyes of thought, seeing it, as the mind must see it, as a marble inscribed by intentionality, the true made beautiful by form. These two messages do not coincide, they alternate. Like a lighthouse, the urn beams one message, then the other, as we respond alternately to its human verisimilitude, which solicits our empathy, or to its triumphant use of its resistant medium, which solicits our admiration. This ode honors both sensation and thought, both beauty and truth, which support each other and interpenetrate, even if in human experience they never perfectly coincide. And yet, I wonder if there is something to the mystical interpretation I mentioned above. Vendler notes two different ways in which the urn speaks to us. The first is from the urn's own eternal standpoint. It uses Platonic abstractions, a highly condensed propositional form, and results in paradox to human ears, or the lighthouse-like alternation between its two aspects. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. In the eternal realm, if there is such a realm, the two do coincide. In our realm, they alternate. Keats posits this eternal vantage point because it fits with the sense of timelessness that a piece of self-enclosed visual art on an ancient urn suggests, and because he believes it fits with philosophy, with serious thought. Did he actually believe in such a realm? I'm not sure. The final ode to autumn, seen by Vendler as the culmination of his odes and his poetical thought, suggests a rejection of this view and a complete embrace of transience. In this interpretation, the Platonic philosophizing of the urn is a stage along the way, a means of affirming both truth and beauty before their real synthesis is found. Yet perhaps that riddling statement of identity remains without negating the actual world of change as a signpost to a transcendent reality. Though I'm not convinced Keats holds to this view, I'm not convinced he rejects it either. The second form of language follows, which is accommodated to human ears. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know. It reassures us our knowledge is sufficient, even though we don't realize the absolute identity of beauty and truth. This is okay. We have the urn, we have art, the friend to man, that truthfully beautifies our lives. We have the alternation and interpenetration of beauty and truth, and this is enough for us. It releases us, says Vendler, from the torment of our insufficiency. This message signifies Keats' acceptance of process, including the dialectic between empathy and reflection, which is an ineluctable process of consciousness. One interpretation of the fact that the urn speaks on two levels, though I'm not sure if Vendler would agree with this, is that Keats isn't saying something like, well, there we have it. This imperfection, this ceaseless oscillation and process is all there is. Instead, he may be keeping open a door to eternity, to the possibility that the two aspects of the urn's riddling epigram do coincide, though we cannot know how. In both embracing the process of life as it is and in keeping a door open to eternity, I think we see Keats' amazing negative capability. This is a term which he uses in the same letter to his brothers that I quoted above, and which he defines like this. Negative capability is when a man is capable of being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. Perhaps the mysterious ending to this immortal ode is a manifestation of this and is meant to evoke a similar state in us. These final lines of the ode have an ontological import. What is the relation between beauty and truth as such? But more importantly for Vendler, they also concern Keats's use of language and his evolving poetic craft. Truth is the concern of thought, which to Keats at this stage is something propositional. It involves interrogation and philosophical abstractions. Beauty, on the other hand, is the concern of sensation, conceived of as something intense and concrete, yet chaotic, dependent upon whatever the senses happen to register. Keats is searching for a way to bring the language of thought and the language of sensation seamlessly together. In this ode, at least, he acknowledges both and includes both, though their union is far from seamless. Like the lighthouse-like utterance of the urn, we first get a flash of one, of sensuous description, and then of the other, of intellectual questioning, propositional assertion, or philosophical abstraction. While on the ontological level, the urn's utterance ultimately remains a mystery, on the level of poetic language, her oracle is fulfilled. In the final ode to autumn, Keats will find a way to bring thought and sensation seamlessly together, to make beauty express truth by the subtle and interconnected way he stations his words and images. In his next Ode on Melancholy, Keats will push his acceptance of process into a mastery of action. No longer seeking to escape life, he will come to embrace it in an even more positive sense, and embrace all of it, the bad and the good, sorrow with joy, and all the senses. Experimenting with poetic images, he will also draw closer to finding a language that unites sensation and thought, beauty and truth.